Ever since I was young, I was trying to figure out what the hell is going on with life. And what I've noticed is that many people are unhappy despite many of the technological advancements that we had. You know, in school you were taught that we are so advanced, we have almost all of it figured out, and now we are beyond spiritual stuff like religion, and we've got this techno paradise here, and it's all fine. But I still notice something is missing. Like, people are not as happy. I began to become depressed and unhappy as I exited childhood. I became a teenager. I became very addicted to video games, pornography, junk food, and overstimulating myself, not being able to sit in a room doing absolutely nothing. And I just kept going and interested in the truth, like what the fuck is going on. And so in this video, I want to share some of the insights that I had that can help explain and help us move beyond the collective problems that we face today. Because what I learned is, in the field of developmental psychology, that humans evolve through many different stages of consciousness and cognitive development, and that currently we are not at the most advanced stages that they are. There's the stage of egocentric, then ethnocentric, which is very traditional and only focused on the certain culture that they're in. Then there's the world-centric, which is more scientific and rational and more multicultural, which is very prevalent today. And then there's the pluralist stage, which is very open-minded and curious about all kinds of points of view, and it says that no point of view privileges others' points of view, and it's the sort of a hippie stage. And there is the integral stage, which sees for the first time that humans evolve through various value systems, and it integrates all of the previous stages and says that they all have partial truths, but they are all each at various stages of consciousness and moral development and spiritual development. And that we have to learn to see that if we want to have the most loving, conscious way of seeing the world and understanding the issues that happen and integrating wise and loving solutions into our life, if we want to reach our highest potential. And it's very systems thinking like. And then beyond that, there's even the cosmocentric stage, which sees all of life as a unity, and that everything is actually one, and that life exists prior to concepts and what the mind constructs, and all sorts of spiritual dimensions. Now, why did I just say that? Because it's very prevalent to understanding, very relevant to understanding many of the issues that we have today. Because quite frankly, as I said, we are so addicted and depressed nowadays, like something is missing. And what I noticed is that, and what I learned, is that we are not as spiritually developed as we are technologically, right? And this is a very crucial insight to have, because we might have figured out to control nature and to use it to our advantage, but this doesn't mean that we have figured out what it is on a being level, on a metaphysical level, why it's here, what the purpose is. And we have nowadays, with our scientific worldview, which is very much the rational, scientific, world-centric stage, we have sort of demonized and reduced many of the inner subjective and spiritual dimensions of life. We have sort of flattened life to only one dimension, the objective dimension. And we have said the subjective doesn't attune to our methods, so it must not exist, right? There's many different opinions on that, but we have reduced life to only the objective dimensions, and that has made us so depressed, because it takes all the purpose, all the spirituality, all the depth from life, whether collectively or individually, because there's so much more that we are missing. We are not realizing that how we are on the inside affects what behaviors we display on the outside, whether that's collectively or individually, and the other way around too, right? How we are on the outside affects how we are on the inside. It's not so obvious what domains are actually helpful and true and real in life, and what is separate and what is not. It's not so simple. And I think we're suffering the consequences of that split, that artificial split, that this certain stage of consciousness that we're currently in, this center of gravity, is leading to. And what we're basically just doing is we're staying stuck there. Because the very first stages of development are all believing they have it all figured out and that the other points of view are not real, that they are misguided and deluded and full of shit. And so what we have done is we have only focused on the objective, real realms of life and reality. And so we are only focusing on external achievements, on gathering more knowledge in our worldview, in our value system, and we are not realizing that there's also the inner dimension, because we have demonized it, we have flattened life to only the objective externals. And so obviously we are not looking inwards, we are not realizing that there's inner growth too. You can expand horizontally, but when you realize that there's different stages of consciousness and development, you can also have an inner transformation, a vertical growth upwards. And this is very important because this will transform your consciousness and your compassion levels enormously, and how you live life. Your metaphysics, your value system, how you see life is extremely, extremely important. And how we can work towards vertical growth is basically, I learned meditation, self-reflection, reading tons of different perspectives, and especially developmental psychology really, really helps. Ken Wilber says that it's like a psychoactive drug on the cognitive development, that you'll start seeing life in a whole different way, and especially conflicts and disagreements, as you will be able to see, oh, it's just value systems disagreeing, and you can see the partial truth in each of them. So yeah, wow, we need to realize that there's more holistic approaches to living, right? And the way we do that is by actually implementing meditation, journaling, and observing what we are writing, and integrating the scientific, the emotional, and the spiritual dimensions of life, because there's various ways of seeing life: in an emotional way, in a spiritual way, in a strictly scientific, objective way. You can see life in many different ways, and human development requires that you are able to flow and integrate all of these perspectives, otherwise we are stuck. And so nowadays we are only chasing on the outside because we've demonized the inside with this current scientific worldview, which is actually outdated, of materialism. Science evolves over time. There's many scientific revolutions. There's always a base state of science which feels normal and sort of like there's a solid ground to reality. But then over time anomalies happen, and these anomalies keep accumulating, and then there's going to be a crisis at some point because these results keep showing up, they keep getting more obvious, they're not just an anomaly anymore, and more people start agreeing that something is wrong here with our worldview, it's not ultimately true, there's more to reality, and then there's a revolution, and then that becomes the new normal. It's going to be an expanded view of what is real, what is true, what is possible. And so science is very flexible, but it takes a long time to adapt. And I feel like right now we are taking a long time to adapt, but it's slowly happening. Materialism is very much impacting how we live life, how we see life, and we see the consequences of that. The suicide rates, the depression rates, the addiction rates. And I'm able to see myself in that. And so this video is just me sharing like what the fuck I learned by just trying to understand, like, hold on, wait a minute, something is not quite right here, right? There's more to life. And yes, of course there is. The inner dimensions, turning within. And our environmental crisis, I forgot to talk about this. How we treat life is also affected, a result of how we see life from the inside. If we see ourselves so separate from life, then we will treat life in a very different way as when we see life as ourself, as life being one, If I see myself as separate from others, I'll treat them in a very different way as seeing myself as everything. And this is what true spirituality does. An integral spirituality will not be religion, which would be a sort of a stage of development that is pre-rational. It would be including the pre-rational, the rational, and residing actually at the post-rational, trans-rational stages of development. So what it says is that there's all sorts of myth and traditions and cultures in the pre-rational, which is all good and fine. There is all sorts of rationales and logics and scientific methods that you can use to manipulate life and to create technology at the rational level. And then there's even things beyond all of that, the post-rational dimensions, the pre-linguistic, the pre-conceptual domains of direct experience of spirit, of consciousness, of silence, of oneness and non-duality, of everything. And this is very important to realize. And integral spiritualities, there's all sorts of traditions, of spiritual traditions that teach you direct methods of realizing this without dogma and ideology, directly in your experience, without having to subscribe to any belief system. And what this does is transforms your way of life, your core values, what you think is important, how you treat life. And when we want to transform the world, what we need to do is we need to realize that we need to raise our consciousness, we need to grow vertically, and this will transform how we live. We need to also integrate not only spiritual waking up, we also need to grow up developmentally by learning developmental psychology and integrating that in our education system. The kids need to learn how to live a life purpose, to find their core values, learn developmental psychology, learn meditation, all sorts of these things, how to treat their emotions. So right now in education, right, we are only focusing on intellectual development. What we also need to teach them emotional development and spiritual development too. It's very reductionistic and materialistic nowadays, is the education system. So there's waking up, there's growing up, and then there's also cleaning up all the psychological stuff and baggage that we have. We need to integrate our shadow, things that we have denied in ourselves, repressed, and that we are now projecting on the world and resisting in the world, because what we deny, what we repress, it gets pushed out. And we need to integrate our traumas, our attachment, wounding, our repressed parts. There's parts work, there's all kinds of work we can do. And that is also missing in a lot of spirituality today, because religion is basically an outdated spirituality, an early form of spirituality. It has not integrated the spiritual waking up, and especially the modern developments of psychology, right? That has been happening in the past 100 years. It's not incorporated and integrated that. And especially also another development like the developmental psychology models like spiral dynamics and ego development theory that show how the human psyche evolves and sees the world in different ways. So we can do this ourselves. We can start as examples. We can start by meditating daily. We can start by journaling and writing and just learning to observe what you write, because that will give us a distance from our current worldview, right? Just self-awareness, basically. We can explore very diverse perspectives by reading outside of our comfort zone, something new. If you're very spiritual, read something scientific. If you're very scientific, read something spiritual. If you're very creative, read something very rational, whatever. Just loosen up those mental frameworks and mental habits and grooves. Break free from ideological rigid belief systems that lock down the mind and stifle it and make it very closed-minded to other points of view. because that is what keeps you at the lower stages of development. We think the other stages are all wrong, and that keeps you locked in a certain way of life. And if you feel stuck, this might be the way out, right? And so yeah, we need to integrate all of that. We not only need to grow technologically, which is awesome. AI and many of the things that we are getting today is just fantastic and phenomenal. I use all these technologies, I'm not demonizing them, but that's not everything. We're seeing it, the consequences in the environmental crises, the mental health crises, the political crises, whatever it is. So we need to also integrate developmental psychology, growing up and waking up and cleaning up. And that will be a holistic solution to many of the problems we face today as mankind. So I hope this was helpful. Thank you for watching. Peace out.